writing from the collected writing or requested writing, exemplar writing. So that if we see a signature, or we see, let's say, plenty of, let's say it's a ransom note, and there's like, a whole through 2 or 3 sentences in the ransom note explaining where he wants the money to be delivered, whatever it might be, but we of the person's not around, the suspect or whoever is not around, and we only have one signature on, let's say, on one of his credit card, on a credit card receipt signature. So that's all we have. We have a paragraph or so of his ransom note, but only a signature on his, a signature as an exemplar that we know came from him. The fact that the exemplar has 10 letters on it that are, let's say, similar to the ransom note, well, that doesn't really show that much. I mean, maybe those 10 letters were written differently. Maybe his signature was written a little bit differently that day. Again, it's slightly differently. Sometimes it can be obvious that it's so wildly different that it certainly can't be. But very often, if you only have a few letters of exemplar, that's not enough to compare to the original writing. So you need to have plenty of original writing and plenty of exemplars. And then a good writing analyst could easily tell whether they're the same author or they're a different author. Sometimes the suspect is unavailable. We have a suspect, but they're unavailable. I mean, they're not always around to be questioned. So, I mean, they might have deliberately run away because they're suspect. But whatever it is, so in that case, we have to try to collect some collected writing specimens, but they might also not be available. These are problems. And the fact is, if you don't have enough writing, very often you simply can't come up with an answer. But with enough samples meaning writing of the question document, and enough exemplars, it can be done for any writing, if you have enough of both. By the way, this is just an example of different people writing in different ways. Here's one way of writing an M, where it's like goes, it goes like in a counterclockwise this way, and here we see it going in a clockwise route. Different people have different writing. This is just a simple example of how different people can write a letter in different ways. There's also the idea of undisciplined handwriting, when, let's say, the questioned writing, let's say it was a suicide note. It's clearly done wildly, where the person that scribbled it without using the person's specific style, not the style that they're naturally write with. And any exemplars that we have, like their diary, were written, clearly and done in a normal fashion, in a natural style, and as the writer was controlled. But this was wild. So these you really can't compare to. It's often found in obscene letters or threatening letters, where the person is in a certain mood when they wrote it, and it might have been wild, and they just wrote it wildly. There is really no way to identify this kind of writing because it's done randomly. It does not relate to the person's natural style of writing. The natural style of writing is unique to the person and can be matched to the person and will match other exemplars. But wild writing will not. So if it's written wildly, there's a severe problem in connecting this to the one who actually wrote it. Fact is, however, you can't do this. You can't keep this up for long. You can't write wildly for a whole paragraph, or let's say a whole page, because you're writing because the handwriting habits, they're ingrained over usually many years. I mean, people don't usually start doing crimes when they're in the 3rd grade or something. Nothing serious. So by the time they're old enough to commit crimes, they've had many years of writing with certain habits. These habits will come through. You can't write wildly for that long because it's just uncomfortable. I mean, you can try it yourself. It's really not that easy. Also, if the person might have been under the influence of drugs or alcohol, his writing might be wild for that reason. So, if any writing done then, very often cannot be matched to an exemplar. Not because, let's say, okay, the point is that if it's written under drugs or alcohol, it's written wildly, and it does not match the exemplar, this does not prove, let's say, the innocence of the person who wrote that, let's say, ransom note. If it was written wildly or under the influence of drugs or alcohol, it cannot be and we have an exemplar from him that shows that it's very different from this ransom note. Well, if the ransom note was written wildly or in an undisciplined fashion, then it does not prove that the suspect did not write the ransom note, because wild writing cannot be related to certainly cannot be easily related to exemplars, and cannot be and the existence of exemplars cannot prove the source of wild writing. Maybe a real professional can do it sometimes, but very often it can't be done. So that's something to watch out for: undisciplined or wild handwriting. We want to compare exemplars with the question document writings. So the best way to do it is that everything was done correct, written in the same way. They're both written in a pen, both written in a fountain with a fountain pen, with a pencil, even with a crayon. Then we can assume the writing is going to be the same, and it won't be different because of the different writing implement. You hold a fountain pen differently than you hold a ballpoint pen. And some people hold pencils different from the way they hold ballpoint pens. The way they it scratches across the paper is a little bit different, and therefore some writings will be slightly different. So these have to be taken into account by the forensic handwriting analyst. Also, some people write differently when there's free space, like just they're writing in the middle of a blank sheet. But when there's ruled lines, they might be a little more organized with their writing. These are all things to be taken into account. So if we are requesting an exemplar from a suspect, and let's say the ransom note was written on lined paper, we have to give him lined paper. If the ransom note was written in magic marker, we have to give him magic marker. If the ransom note was written even on, let's say, scratchy paper, give him that kind of scratchy paper. We have to try to match the environment that the ransom note was written in with the exemplar. In this case, with a requested writing, with that where we're getting the exemplar. It should also, the subject of the exemplar we're asking for, this again, we're talking about requested writing. We're requesting from a suspect writing that, again, let's say it was on a ransom note. So the subject should be similar, with similar words or letters. We want to have something to compare very easily. If the ransom note mentioned, whatever it is, you people have to pay me $1 million, or you'll never see the person again. If it's you people, well, try to get the exemplar, meaning the subject of the exemplar, meaning the suspect, to write about a subject that has the word people in it. So you should have similar words or similar letters, so that the analyst can say, okay, the way he wrote people on this document is very different from the way the word people was written in the ransom note, so it probably wasn't him. So we want to have, in our requested writing, we want to have words or letters or combinations of letters similar to the question document's letters. Also, we shouldn't wait too long, not a few years, because sometimes people's writing does change over time. Now, we're not talking about the first grade writing compared to high school writing. We're not, that obviously changes, but we're talking about after the person is well trained in writing, let's say from the high school years and on, it can change. But usually not so much that a good handwriting analyst will not be able to tell. So, regarding requesting handwriting samples from a suspect, well, if he's a suspect, he might be testifying himself by giving over these written samples, and maybe so. It's in the Constitution. We cannot